So welcome to the 449th meeting of the Regional Council. Once again, we're still in the pandemic, so we have restrictions on who can come into our room. So we will be having some members of the public attending, but people who want to attend the meeting from outside are going to be online. So welcome to all of those people. This is a very significant meeting because it's the sign-off of our annual plan. So there's a great deal of excitement in the room to have got through that process for the third time during our 3-year term. So I'd just like to hand over to Councillor Craig Pauling, who will open the meeting with a mihi and the Karakia. Thank you, Craig.
Tai tumu tai pari ka waia maha nui ki te paupau o te raki haueha. Pupu mai ka haua tāwhi mā te whakepuria te au hoko o te whenua Pākihi Waitaha e a tihei Mauriora. A te mihi tuatahi mi ki nā atua kaharawa o raki e tuhi iho nei ko whakatuhi e tapato. E nā atua o mai o kaha, o mai o aroha kia mātou i tēnei wā, i nā wā katoa a tēnā koutou. A ka huri au tapu kāro ki nā tini aitua, ko wehi atu ki te pō, e nā mate, o ia marae, o ia whānau, o ia takiwa, haere atura. Moi mai o ki oki mai. Apiti hono tātou hono, tōku mati ki tōku mati, apiti hono tātou hono, tonga ora ki tonga ora, nō reira a tēnā koutou. A tēnā koutou, I rongi tāho tango o te wā.
Do you know where I can find a number for how much carbon
wā o Matariki,
o
te tauhou Māori tuki.
Yes. Do you know if there's like a reliable measure that I trust to
te whānau Wiley, te whānau Morrison, te whānau Melville, ki te awo Kakahu, nau mai hara mai, mo tō koero I tō awa, tēnā koutou. Ki nā tangata kei ko rā, kei waho te whare nei, ka hara mai o tō tātou kaupapa I te kaituna, a tēnā koutou. Ai, ki nā kai kaunihera, ki nā kai mahi o tātou nei kaunihera, a tēnā koutou. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, a tēnā koutou. Te Karakia Timatanga o tātou nei hui. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mākina kina ki utu, kia mātaratara ki tai hea, ki ana te atakura he teo, he hoka, he hauhu, tihei, Mauriora.
Thank you, Councillor Pauling. Just so that everybody's clear, we have Amber, immediate people. We have Amber from staff, Georgina O'Connor-Harding from NZ News Talk NZB, Callum McDuff from staff, and we also have Neva Chittock from a multimedia journalist from Radio New Zealand, who I understand are online. I've received a partial apology from Councillor Elizabeth McKenzie. We'll know the exact time. She's not going to be here when she lets us know. She is looking after the deputation that we've got, or the public forum people who are coming down in Fairlie. I haven't been advised of any conflicts of interest that anybody's got or that have changed, so we're moving on from that. We're up to item 4 on the agenda, which is on page 4, Public Forum Deputations and Petitions. We are going to move a resolution. Oh, no, we're not going to do that. Sorry. Wait a minute. We are going to, first of all, we are going to do it around the petition, are we? We're going to move to actually receive the petition from it's only going to be now from the Little River Eco Collective. There's only going to be one position presented. They've amalgamated them. And I'm advised that we need to agree to temporarily suspend the standing orders 17.1 to allow a petition to be received to council with less than 5 days notice. I'll move that from the chair. Who would like to second it? Seconded by Councillor Peter Scott. All those in favour, please say aye. Is there anybody opposed? There being nobody opposed, that's carried. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to ask staff member Catherine McMillan to bring in Donald Matheson and Elizabeth Ellsworth, who are both from Little River Eco Collective, to present the petition. We'll just wait a minute while they come in, and they will have 5 minutes to speak. Yes, and you have to put your masks on. When it comes to doing the resolution, yeah, we'll just take out this number 2. Yeah, yeah. That one there. Yeah. So, welcome Donald and welcome Elizabeth. Welcome to our meeting. This is the 549th meeting of the Regional Council, so we're very pleased to welcome you. We've suspended our standing orders so that you're able to present your petition. You have 5 minutes to talk to that, and there may be questions. We'll see how it goes. So thank you for coming in today. Over to you.
Kia ora, thank you very much. Kia ora koutou, councillors. Kia ora in particular to representatives of Mana Whenua, the lake that, Te Waihora, the lake that's just on the edge of this proposed development is taonga for iwi. So I particularly acknowledge Yayan, sorry, looking for Yayan. Kia ora, and Yvette. Kia ora. So I just want to say, I'm Donald Matheson. I'm from Little River, representing Little River Eco Collective, and Elizabeth Elworthy, also from the Eco Collective. I want to just say 2 things really quickly and then hand over to Lizzie. Firstly, in presenting this petition, which says stop the proposed cattle feedlots in Te Waihora, Lake Ellesmere, Otautahi. In presenting this to you, we acknowledge that you don't make the decision. You've got colleagues upstairs, but you set the context. You provide the leadership, and you're looking at the annual plan shortly. The annual plan is about, among other things, changing land use practices, ensuring look after the water, working with Mana Whenua, addressing climate crisis. These things, I hope you'll be glad to know, are the kind of things that the people who've signed this petition were also strongly in support of. You've got, I think, the backing of community to head in that direction, but you've also got a proposal for industrial farming, which is heading in completely the opposite direction as well. So we wanted to draw that to your attention in providing leadership to staff upstairs. If you want to reach the goals that you're talking about in your annual plan, these things are inconsistent with that. Industrial farming, 2,000, 2,200 cattle in a confined space. It's not the kind of farming that people who signed this are interested in, and I don't think it's the direction that ECan wants to take the region, although obviously that's for you to say. The second thing I wanted to say is that there's a saying in there that decisions are best made in the sunlight. The more public scrutiny, the better the decision will be. Wongan Hills has put together a report from its environmental consultants saying all the good things about their proposed feedlot, that in a confined space you can control the nitrates, that the cattle, beef cattle will poo and pee onto sawdust or straw that will be turned daily. You can then, and all the water, all the liquid will evaporate, and then you can put that on your field in a controlled way. That's all cool in theory, but it has to work absolutely perfectly. And Wongan Hills, in some of its other properties, has not always been a fantastic environmental steward. So in considering the decision, your colleagues upstairs, your planners, we would argue need as much information as possible in order to make a good decision. And for that, it really needs to be publicly notified. And we want to say that to you in public in this democratic forum. And I hope that that wafts up through the floorboards and the concrete so that they hear it upstairs. So kia ora koutou. Thank you again for listening.
Tēnā koutou, thank you for being present and allowing us to speak to you. We're here because we really care about our river, Kaituna, about the valley, about the degradation that has already happened. For 30 years, this river's been degrading. It was a river where once children, families could swim and fish. Now it's slimy green below the current farming development. If we don't do something now, what example are we setting for the future, for our children, our grandchildren? We've got this rhetoric about climate change and our stewardship of the land, but what are we demonstrating if we don't stand up to a development that is going completely in the opposite direction to those who are trying so hard in another direction to protect our land for the future? And if we don't do something now, we have lost the chance. The damage will be irreversible. And it's already on a very downward path. The Kaituna Valley and the river is one of the most degraded rivers on the whole of Banks Peninsula. This industrial development could be irreparable forever if we allow this to happen with bleaching of nitrates, etc. You will well know all the things that can happen. So we really implore you, please, to stand up or at least represent our voice for not only now, but the future generations that are going to follow.
Thank you for speaking to us. Is there anybody that wishes to follow up with a question? No. Councillor Afan.
Yeah, kia ora koutou. Thank you so much for being here today and for your group outside. My question was just about you've obviously engaged with a lot of detail on this current issue, and I wondered if you had any comment for us in terms of navigating the difference between what is City Council's responsibilities and what is ECan, and how has that been a straightforward process for you? Do you have any comments about how we might do better as joint public organisations, or any comment there?
Yeah, we were disappointed that the City Council didn't get in touch with you and say, we've got a big proposal in Kaituna Valley, which has implications for your stewardship, your kaitiaki of the land. So if the two councils had looked at their consenting processes together and coordinated, the City Council would have been able to get better information in making its decision. And that decision was made very quickly. It was, for example, the valley floods and will flood more. The application said there is no flooding risk here. You have the data on flooding. City Council accepted the developers, the farmers' claim that there's no flooding risk. So there's clearly problems there that full information wasn't available to the City Council, and things could have been coordinated better there to lead to better decision making. Is that kind of what you're asking about?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that comment. Anything further?
I tried to find out about the water testing of the Kaituna River, and the process for me trying to get the information from ECan was extremely difficult. And I would have expected this was data more easily available to the public. I was sent a spreadsheet that spanned many pages, but there was no clear summary for the public. The only information I could draw on was the NIWA website, but I would hope that ECan, that all of you have that information more readily available to you, so you know what is actually happening. So that was my direct experience, was the struggle to actually find clear information and current information about the state of the river.
Thank you very much. We'll take that on board, and we'll ask the CEO to have a look at that. That's very good. So thank you very much. I don't think there's any further questions. So just before you go, we now move a resolution that we're receiving the petition from Little River Eco Collective on the Kaituna feedlot. So I'll move that. Who would like to second that? Seconded by Councillor Lan Farn. All those in favour, please say aye. Anyone opposed? So that's carried. So thank you very much. Catherine, if you just give them to Catherine, she'll hold on to those and she'll take you out and sign you out of the building. Thank you for giving up your time to come and see us. Okay, thank you. Bye. Right, now we have the second item in our public forum, which is not, as that one was receiving a petition, obviously. This one's a public forum, and we've got the residents from Kakahu. I need to practice. Kakahu residents. We've got Anne Smiley. Is that you, Anne? I can see.
Yes, it is.
It is. Hello. Welcome. And we've got Neville. Can I see Neville? Is he on there too?
He's
Yes,
just round the corner.
Hello. And hello to Anne as well. Hello. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you 15 minutes to speak. We know that you've got some overheads, slide transparencies that we've got here. So we'll get those up on the screen. And you've also got a video, and staff have that organised. So we'll just have to see how that's going to work. So over to you.
Right.
I'm just going to share the screen for you.
Okay, you share the screen, Liz. That'd be good.
Okay, I think we're ready to go.
Over to you. Start when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. And thank you for being willing to hear our long-standing concerns about the Kakahu River. This story is of 3 families who share their concerns about the deterioration of the river. This slide, our family has lived beside the river for more than 73 years. The Kakahu River has been used as a water supply for drinking, washing, stock water, a food source. There are eels, native kura, trout, and for swimming. Many families over the years have spent many hours swimming, catching fish, cockabullies, trout, the kura and the mussels. Because the water was so clear, it was easy for kids, especially, to snorkel and observe the life in the river. This photo attached shows just how crystal clear the water was. It was taken February 1995, before the transfer of water from the Lake Opua. It's actually a fact that after all this time, there are very few people around who know just how clear this water was. These 3 precious family photos I share with you show some examples of the life that was able to be found and caught in the river. These photos were taken 1996 to 1998. Sadly, any future grandchildren will never see the beauty of our river, never see and catch the aquatic life that was, and never enjoy the beauty of our beautiful natural area. What changed? Early 2000s, a proposal to transfer water from Lake Opua into Kakahu River was notified. This was the Kakahu irrigation scheme. We raised concerns about clarity and quality of water being transferred, but were told at all meetings that no one would be allowed to take water from one source that would degrade the receiving water. We were reassured that the allowable water clarity, turbidity, from the transferring source was to be no greater than 25%. Our family didn't oppose their proposal. We believed that clean water and a bit more water in times of low river flow would probably benefit the river. Sadly, how very wrong we were. This photo shows what became a not uncommon sight. This was not a one-off occurrence. Certainly not more than 25% clarity turbidity reduction. Certainly didn't need any measuring to identify it. How could any aquatic life survive in this kind of dirt? The aftermath. The water could not meet its consent requirement of 25% turbidity. It was at this time flowing through an open ditch. The canal was piped in 2008. However, the sediment did not significantly reduce, and the site shown in the previous photo still continued often. So what happened next? The consent was increased to 50% turbidity so that the Opua water could comply with the consent. In layman terms to us, this meant that the water carrying more dirt and sediment was now allowed to flow into the Kakahu River. We were not consulted about this change to the consent. Since the water from Lake Apua went into the Kakahu River, the health of the river has continued to deteriorate. It's not uncommon to see discharges of dirty water, visually dirty, into the Kakahu River on Friday afternoons or early evenings. Life in the river is almost non-existent, except for a few skinny eels. It's been a very long time since we've seen a kura or a trout. For the first few years after the irrigation scheme started, we were able to see some improvement, particularly in the clarity of the water during the winter season when the water from Lake Apua was turned off. However, for many years now, there has not been any such improvement. The river smells musty, it's no longer clear. It appears to us to have suffocated. Our family started to experience some sickness. At our own expense, we installed a rainwater collection system. In the summer of 2000, by chance, we came across a health warning on the Lake Apua. These warnings advised that the water in the lake was unsafe to swim in, the water was not safe for consumption, and neither were the fish, due to the presence of cyanobacteria. We, as a family, were drinking this water from the Kakahu River and were given no such warning. Seemed very odd to us that water requiring a health warning in one place can be discharged into a river and no health warning be required on the receiving water. We can no longer swim in the river, there's no life to see. We can no longer use the river for any kind of recreation. The Kakahu River seems to have become a dirty, smelly drain of dead water from Lake Apua. We're aware that monitoring of the water takes place at various sites, but what is being monitored? Are the right things being monitored? We're not scientists, but we know that you only get to see what you look for. We're aware of various reports that find nothing to worry about. Other reports show us the presence of hard metals, DDT, deodorin, arsenic, etc. Different scientists produce different reports from the same water. So as non-scientists, this can be confusing and we wonder which reports are accurate. Has this had any effect on our health, our own personal health for the future? We have talked about the turbidity, sediment. However, the health of the river is not just about the clarity of the water, but also about what else is in the water. We don't need any report to tell us that the Kakahu River is dead. The future. We're not interested in apportioning blame. That wouldn't actually help anyone, and it certainly won't help the river. We just want the river cleaned up. We feel we haven't been listened to. ECan is the watchdog for our environment, yet we feel that ECan has consented to the pollution of the Kakahu River. We want the ECan Council to help. We want our river back. We want clean water going into the Kakahu. We want something done, and you, the ECan Council, are the only ones who can do something for us and for our river.
Did you want
That, yeah, now we'll just play the video if we can get it to video.
Here it is. Can you see the video?
Yes, we can see it, Elizabeth.
I don't know if you'll be able to hear it, but just hear it, but please let us know.
Here we are, Friday afternoon.
Can you hear it?
Kakahu irrigation ditch.
Yeah, we can hear it.
Yeah, Kakahu River. And dirty water being put in once again by Apua water. Absolutely disgusting. Just clay overload. We'll go for a little walk up to their testing mark. As you can see, nice clear river, clear bottom, you can clearly see the bottom. Come up here, it's always a nice river, I remembered. You can clearly see the bottom in there, see all the stones. There's their testing mark. Nice clear river. Beautiful clear water. We'll go for a walk down to the bottom mark.
If I can take 5 minutes, a couple of minutes to speak to it, not 5, a couple of minutes to speak to it. Just wait till it gets to this discharge again. So
Get some nice clear river until you get to their discharge, which you can see coming into the bottom of the photo there now. You can just see the dirt already. Just pull.
now, if I could just take a moment just to speak to that video that you've just seen. This was a video that was taken on Friday the 18th of March, which was a...
I think I might have just accidentally. Hang on, come back.
We still have you online, by the way. We can hear you and everything.
Oh, you can hear me? Right.
Like you have, but we've got you.
Okay.
We're trying to find the... Oh, here it is. There we go.
Yep. If I just have a couple of moments just to speak to that video. That video was actually taken by our son on a Friday afternoon, 18th of March. Obviously, dirty water was being discharged into the Kakahu. This year. The concern that we had, there were a number of concerns actually, the dirty water was one of them, but our son had attempted to contact the ECan hotline with no luck. He tried to contact Opua Water Limited, but they had gone for the week. He did manage to contact the raceman for the Opua Water Limited. Now, this chap told Ruben he hoped Ruben wasn't wasting his time. He agreed to meet Ruben at the discharge site, which he did. He didn't know why the dirty water was being discharged. He wanted to know why Ruben was concerned now that he wasn't drinking the water any longer. He asked Ruben, eventually, when nothing was going very well, he asked Ruben, didn't he have any hedges to go away and cut? That's Ruben's line of work. This wasn't a very friendly encounter, and it didn't show any regard, his attitude didn't show any regard or responsibility for the health of the river. We didn't even ever get any feedback from the incident. It didn't fill us with any confidence that anyone actually cared about the river. No. Thank you for listening to our concerns. Just before the next speaker comes, I just have one last question: is how will we be kept informed by ECan about what's actually happening, any progress that might be being made, or just what's actually happening? How will that happen?
Thank you. We will, at the end of this, we will have some questions, but just to let you know that we pass a resolution asking our CEO, and she will work with staff to provide a written response to you. And we will endeavour to keep in contact after that as well. So we'll get a clear response for you. So who would like to speak next?
Thank you. I'm just going to head over to Neville now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome, Neville. Just start when you're ready.
Oh, hello. Yes. Right. Now I'm in a little bit different position than the Morrisons and the Smileys, because I still have some of the Kakahu River that is still the Kakahu River. So the Stony Creek and the Kakahu River join at the top of our farm, and it runs for about 4 kilometres through to the Kakahu Gorge. From discharge point and above is about 2.5 km, and below discharge point a kilometre and a half. So above discharge point, there's more likely 3 areas that still have fish in them. They have 2 fish in each area. They don't share. They're very territorial. So there's 6 fish in that particular part of the river. I cross the river more likely in 5 spots, and at certain times of the year you'll see the cockabilly still there. You can stop, turn over the stones, and there's still life in the river, crustaceans, insects. So the river is, the bed of the river is alive, and of course there's always eels there. So in the last 15 years, there's been a big change in the catchment. A lot of properties above us have changed hands. So, for example, all those farms beforehand were sheep and beef farms. Now we have Dean Reddycliffe. He's got a dairy platform above us. Dean runs about 900 cows. Roger Horn, he still has some sheep. He brought Les Maxwell's place. But he does dairy support for Dean, so he takes his cows in the wintertime. So he plants quite a lot of kale up there. Wayne Scarlett brought Robin Wright's. He leases it to a dairy farm, so it's dairy support. William Turnbull's place was been sold. Half of it goes to Adam Glass. He's got a dairy farm in Methven, so he brings his bull calves and heifer calves to that farm and finishes them. The rest of William Turnbull's place has been sold to Keith Orange, and he now has deer on it. He's ring fenced it. That's right at the top of the Tuis. It's a tussock block. And Ian McDonald,
Yes.
right beside us, he bought John Roberts' place. He had deer in it. He's got rid of the deer and now runs heifers. He buys in heifers, excuse me, and fattens them. So as you can listen to that, more than likely you would say that there's been a huge change of the catchment from sheep to cattle and deer. But there are some things that happen when you buy a farm, right? And you have a livestock change. You have to fence the waterways. You've got to do the wet areas. You've got to fence them. And to their credit, all these guys are doing this. So the catchment above us is still pretty good. The water that comes into the river is still alive. Well, it supports life. Like we wouldn't have the fish and the cockabillies and the eels unless these guys were doing it right. So the catchment may have changed, but these guys are doing their farming things right. Is it as good as it was 30 years ago? No, it's not. You know, you don't get rid of all the sheep, put on deer and cattle, and without casualties. So the casualties are the crayfish, the freshwater mussels. The rest of the river is going pretty good, I would have said. And I would say it's stabilised. It's not getting any worse. That's the way it is. So below discharge point, you've got 1.5 kilometres. Now this river snakes through our place. So in the past, there's been 4 areas that would support fish. Well, and I say would have. It doesn't support fish now. Like there's no fish there. I cross the river in 3 places. You never see cockabillies. Turn over the stones. Nothing there. Nothing alive. The bed of the river is dead. You do see eels. Like the eels, you see eels, and a bit unusual, you see the eels during the day. Like they're cruising those areas, more than likely looking for food, I'd say. But that's pretty much what it's like below the discharge point. In the last 5 years, we've had to do some things in farming. Most farmers have had to do nutrient budgets, environmental plans. So we've done both of these. Our environmental plan was submitted and has been passed. We had a person from DOC come in and have a look at our bat roost. There's a bat roost on the river that they just checked that was intact. We had 3 people from Environment Canterbury come to inspect the property. And I'd have to say, just on a bypass here, these 3 people were excellent. They weren't confrontational. They had ideas and they helped us with things, and we put some of those things, or most of those things, into our environmental plan. So we got a green light with that. Thumbs up, I would like to think. So we've got 2 main catchments in on our farm. One of them has 5 sediment ponds, the other one has 7 sediment ponds. These ponds work because we've got to clean them up every 7 to 10 years. We're fencing off wet areas, we're planting natives. We put in about 15 to 19 hectares of winter feed crop, which we feed to our sheep, not to cattle, to sheep. And we're careful when we work those areas that the swell isn't disturbed and there's clear areas between that and the gullies. If the crop is on a slope, well, we graze from the top down. So our stock go on in the mornings, off at night. So we have multiple runoff areas for these sheep. Now, the thing that really burns me about this is both these catchments run into the Kakahu River below discharge point. So and the discharge point below it, all you can say about it, the water, is that it doesn't support life. The river is dead, or actually you can say it's been sterilised. And here we are digging out sediment ponds, putting in native areas and fencing off our wet areas, and the catchment, all the water is running into a river which is dead. So I don't know how that works for you guys, but it seems a bit stupid for me. So I don't mind doing these things. This is what should be done. But in our particular case, don't know. Any questions?
Thank you very much for that good description, Neville. I think we might move on. There's somebody else is going to speak, aren't they?
Yes, there is.
Yeah. I think we'll leave all the questions till the end. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Anne, you're next. So welcome, Anne. Over to you to start.
Thank you. Tēnā koutou katoa. No Scotland oku tupuna e noho ana au ki Kakahu. Ko tēnei tuku mihi ki ngā tangata whenua o te rohe nei. Ka mihi hoki au ki ngā tohu o te rohe nei. No reira, tēnā koutou katoa. Our family would like to acknowledge tangata whenua history through this land, known to them as Te Kakahu. Also, we are honoured to have had a close family association with Kelly Anglin, the first kaiwhakahaere of Ngāi Tahu, heading Te Runanganui o Tahu Incorporated. Kelly was renowned for his wisdom and understanding of whenua, whakapapa and mahika kai. Te Kakahu, he said, was a favoured mahika kai area. The Morrison family has had a close association with the Kakahu River for over 90 years and has resided here since 1957. This association and the love for this largely unchanged area has led to over 1,000 acres of the family's land now either covenanted by QE2 National Trust, belonging to the Department of Conservation, or belonging to the South Canterbury Conservation Trust. My husband John and I have a small farm which has almost 3.5 kilometres of the Kakahu River, either as boundary or traversing it. It is to our distress that in our almost daily contact with the Kakahu River, we are forced to confront the degradation and suffocation of what was pre-irrigation water release, a thriving and wondrous life force. The diversity of the river system included vital invertebrate populations, native fish, rare freshwater mussels, kaura, both long and short-finned eels, and trout. This ecosystem also supported long-tailed bats, many species of native or endemic birds, and many species of introduced birds. The river is at the very centre of this circle of life. It is crucial for the existence of these creatures. But, as we always knew would happen, once the irrigation water was released into the Kakahu, bank collapse has been a constant and destructive force along the river side. Banks, weakened and undermined by a constant raised water level over a 9-month period each year, collapse into the river at almost every fresh and flood. The sediment dropped into the bed smothers the invertebrate life of the river, the very basis of the food chain upon which all other species depend at one level or another. Massive biosecurity funding from the Department of Conservation and Environment Canterbury for the protection of the bat population makes absolutely no sense when the river, which is at the very centre of the bat's existence, cannot live. At the original hearing in 2003, it was acknowledged by the applicant that, and I quote, there is a risk that cyanobacteria, including formidium, will be transferred from the Opua to the Kakahu and Te Moana rivers, where the species appears not to be present currently. At the same hearing, Dr. Adrian Meredith detailed in paragraph 34 of his section 42A report the potential for significant adverse effects from cyanobacterial taxa on the river. He considered this to be one of the greatest risks in relation to compromising the values of the Kakahu. Well, they were right. The arrival of cyanobacteria in the river has been very affecting. It has inconveniently altered the way our daughter operates her popular boarding kennels. It has caused us a great deal of expense as we have had to install several large water tanks and a rainwater system. No small job, as we now have to have enough water for the boarding kennels, farm animals and our household. As if that wasn't enough, there now appears to be increasing evidence of other poisons being leaked from the bed of Lake Apuha and therefore being discharged into the Kakahu. I would like to end by telling you of our grief, our bone-aching sadness and our anger at watching our river die. Too many times it has been too hard to be beside. No river should have to endure the slow death of poisons and suffocation that human greed has foisted upon this one. The river would, if it could, restore itself over time. It needs to be given a chance. By letting the river breathe again, it will restore the life within it and around it, and enable it to recover its Māori and mana. Kia kaha, te Kakahu.
Thank you, Anne. Now we'll see if there's some questions from people. So just be near the computer and we'll see what questions we've got. Who would like to ask a question? Councillor Farn.
Yeah, kia ora koutou online. Thank you so much for your presentations this morning and just so openly sharing your really documented journey over a considerable amount of time and the decline of the river. My question is just in terms of councillors having some good context on this, when you refer to the discharge point from Opua water, is that, can you give us some more context around that? Is that, for example, like the irrigation take and whatever's not used comes out the discharge point, or what are you actually referring to in terms of that aspect of your presentation?
Each year, the water is now coming via a pipe from Lake Opua down through the pipe and comes into the Kakahu River at a discharge point just below Mulva Hills, which is what Neville talked about. Yeah. Is that what you mean?
Yes, thank you. So the water comes directly from the lake itself?
Yes, via that pipe, yes. From the Skipton Bridge. It initially came via an open ditch, and then in, I think I said 2008, it was piped. And it's for irrigation. It's for irrigation. It comes down via that pipe into the Kakahu River, then down through the Kakahu River. We're in the gorge part of it, which is what I've referred a lot of my talk to. And then it goes down further for the farmers for irrigation. That's what the whole plan was. It started as the Kakahu irrigation scheme initially. And in that video, you'll have seen where that dirty water was coming into the Kakahu River. That is the discharge point.
Okay, thank you so much. And then also, is the entirety of the area that you're describing, is that all above Earls Road Bridge?
Yes, it is.
It is. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anne, and rest assured we'll get some, ask this CEO to get some diagrammatic form of this and some more understanding of it for everybody following up from this presentation. Has anybody else got a question? Councillor Ian McKenzie.
Yeah, look, thank you for the presentation. And this may not be a significant point, but twice I think in your presentation you referred to Friday afternoon as inferring that there's an specific issue on Friday afternoons in terms of the quality of the discharge from the pipe.
Yes.
Have I picked that up wrong, or is there an issue
No,
there?
you're absolutely correct. It's not uncommon to see because we spend quite a lot of time at the river, although less these days because it's not a pleasant place to be. But and there are points on our farm where you can actually see the river in the gorge, so you can see the colour of the water. But also, when we're going from our place out into the main road, we actually go across the road where the discharge point is, so we can easily see. And because it's of interest to us, we always look at what's actually coming through that pipe. And yes, and sometimes we're going away at a weekend, so we are looking on a Friday afternoon or evening, and that is not an uncommon sight. So you picked that up correctly.
Thank you very much. Was anybody else wanting? Councillor Vicky Southworth.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, a question about the way the water comes in. So you're saying there's not like a constant flow. It's at times it comes in and at other times it doesn't. If the latter, how does it change? Like, does the rate of the change in water level occur rapidly? Does it create a change in the water level when it comes in?
Yes, it does, because it's actually it's 2 cumecs comes in. They put in 2 cumecs, and it's turned on because it's for irrigation, and there's no irrigation required over the winter months. It's actually turned on about when's it come on? About August. From about the end of August and goes through till depending on the season. I mean, this year's been a bit wet, so I think it was turned off somewhat earlier. But it can be 8 or 9 months of flow down the river, but then turned off for the winter months. Oh, just a little bit of correction here on the details. They only put in what they take out. So further down for the irrigation. Does that make sense?
All good. We'll get some more details around this. So because we've obviously got people that completely understand this system, so we'll follow up with that. Was anybody else wanting to ask a question? Councillor Craig Pauling.
Yeah, kia ora koutou. Yeah, thanks so much for your presentations, all the 3 presenters. And in particular, thanks to the last speaker in referencing and teaching me something about Te Kakaho, the name of the the river. So thanks for that, and your reference to our tupuna, Kelly Anglam. So thank you. I just wanted to know, so the irrigation consent, do you know when that comes up again? Is that going to come up for renewal or something in the future?
We think it's every 4 years, but in about 4 years' time. But yeah, I think that's what we were told when, I think it was Justin McLaughlin may have told us that it's coming up in 4 years' time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wanting to ask a question? I understand from Justin that staff have been up there to see you recently.
Actually, they came 3 months ago, actually, almost 3 months ago. Justin and Graham Clark came to see us. And there was a bit of follow-up to actually happen, which actually happened on Monday. But that didn't tell us anything that we didn't actually know. It told us why the consent changed, that it was 25%. It just reinforced that it was 25%. It was changed to 50% because they couldn't work with inside the consent. And without that change in the without changing it to 50%, the irrigation scheme would have had to stop. That did not fill me with any kind of confidence because we knew that already and no one was keen to stop the scheme, you know, so it was increased. That didn't fill us with any confidence.
All right, thank you. We'll finish with the consensus there, I think. And thank you very much for your excellent presentations. They were really well done, and you spent some time preparing them. So we heard that really clearly, and it truly sounds like a beautiful area of our world. And I think you would. So thank you for conveying your feelings about it. We're going to move our formal resolution now, and also just before we do that, thank you to our Councillor Elizabeth McKenzie for assisting with getting the technology right and everything there. So we're going to move a resolution here, and it reads like this. The Council receives the public forum from the Kakahu residents, Anne Smiley, Neville Melville, Valley Hill, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, Anne Morrison, regarding the Kakahu River, and provides a reply to Anne Smiley as soon as practical. So I'll move that. Who would like to second that from Councillor Peter Scott? All those in favour, please say aye. Then being nobody against, that's carried. So thank you very much for taking your time today to be with us. It was very well done. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
We're moving to the supplementary paper now, everybody, which looks like this. I don't know where it is on your machine. See if you can find it. You got it on Thursday, the 16th of June. Right, it's a resolution to, first of all, we need to be a bit bureaucratic here. We have to have a resolution to accept the supplementary agenda. So I'll move that we receive the report to add item 9.2.4, Chief Executive's leave, appointment of acting Chief Executives to the matters to be considered report. But it says here under Public Excluded. So why are we doing this here? Oh, okay. Under Public Excluded, that's moved by me, seconded by Councillor Peter Scott. All those in favour, please say aye. There being nobody opposed, that's passed. That's totally technical, just to get it on the agenda. Thanks very much, everybody. We're now moving on to notice of motions. There are, oh, is that right? Yes, there's no notices of motions. We go up to minutes, page 6 of your agenda, the unconfirmed minutes. I don't think there's any changes we've got here. We've noted, we've fixed up any small changes and staff will look into that. So that the council confirms the minutes from council meeting held on the 19th of May 2022. Who would like to move it? Move it by Councillor Claire Mackay, seconded by Councillor Megan Hand. She looks like she might like to second that. All those in favour, please say aye. There being nobody against, that's carried. Thank you, Megan, and thank you, Claire. Unconfirmed minutes, item 7.2 on page 13 of your agenda. Councillor Mackenzie has a matter of accuracy, which has been noted in the resolutions below. So we've fixed up your email, what you noted, Elizabeth. So the first resolution is that the council confirms the minutes from the council meeting of May 24. Who would like to move that? Moved by Councillor Phil Clearwater, seconded by Councillor Lan Farm. All those in favour, please say aye. That's carried. And number 2, we're confirming the minutes with a minor correction. The council meeting of the 25th of May, and all the details are there. I'll move that from the chair, seconded by Peter Scott. All those in favour, please say aye. That's carried. Thank you very much. We're up to page, we done all those? Yes, we have. We're up to page item 8 now, which is on page 27. This is this bank of minutes from previous committees. We're just noting these minutes on page 27 and the information received in relation to the joint and external and limited membership committee meetings. I'll take that as read. I'll move that from the chair, seconded by Councillor Peter Scott. All those in favour, please say aye. Anybody against? There being nobody against, that's carried. Right, we're on to the next thing, which is council resolution status. That's the resolutions of agenda item 8.2 on page 65. Has anybody got any questions or anything they'd like to, or any comments they'd like to make? No, so we'll move up the resolution. Notes the status of previous resolutions provided in the status of council resolutions report June 2022. I'll move that, seconded by Councillor Phil Clearwater. Did anyone have a question? Yes, Councillor Clearwater, you do.
Just a comment that I under in relation to the Metrobus Route 17 and 28 service review and involving Cass Bay too. Just I understand from staff that in fact the service starts in July. Is due to start in July after the term holidays. Just for clarity around that.
Yes, thank you for noting that. I think staff have taken that on board. Thank you very much. Anybody else wish to raise any other points about the resolution status of the past resolutions, or any comments or anything about it? No. Okay, so did I get a mover and seconder? Me and Phil. I've moved and seconded, had that moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Anybody opposed? Not being anybody opposed, that's carried. 76, we're up to page 76, 8.3. I suggest we just stand up for a minute now, at least I'm going to. I don't mind whether you all do or not, but I am. Because we're just going to go into this. And what time did we say lunch was? Oh, we'll just have a wee adjournment for a minute. Oh, it wasn't really 2 minutes, but 1 minute. 1 minute. Okay, we'll get going because we've only got an hour and then we've got lunch. All right, everybody, we're resuming the meeting. Thank you very much. We're on page 76 of the agenda of 159 pages, which is interesting. So we're very pleased to be at the point in time where we're going to move up our annual plan. And we've got 2 lovely staff members at the table, Catherine and Stuart, and they're going to say a few words about it. Off you go.
Very few words. As you know, the purpose of this paper is to present the annual plan Mahere 2022-23. I'll take the paper as read, but except to note that the council has put substantial effort into this, developing this commitment to the community for our activities in the coming year, and it follows consultation on a draft annual plan in March and deliberations in May. So it's with pleasure. One note I'll just make of clarification, just for complete clarity. In on page 77, bullet 6, the 7th bullet under number 6, it reads delay to increase funding of the Meru Raku program to 450,000, and at the end, just for clarity, of course, we note, and that's $1 million in 2022, 23, 24. So just that, and with that, I will take any questions of clarification.
Catherine, is there any questions for Catherine, or are we all right about that? Lan?
Is this our only chance to ask questions of staff about the annual plan generally? Oh, okay. Oh, I just wanted to know, in terms of any dollar values we can provide the community in terms of information about where we're landing with this annual plan. Do we have any such information available, or will it be part of our communications? I'm just not clear on where that got to.
As I understand it, staff member Teflon with the comms unit is doing extensive outline of that, which is going to be put up on the web space, and they'll have money, funding issues in there too. That's correct, isn't it? Yeah. So that will be done. Anybody else got any questions they'd like to ask? All right, well, we haven't formally moved the resolution. We're going to do that now, but I know you're not going anywhere, so I'm going to be a bit flexible about how we do this. So if things come up along the way, might come back to you. So I'm going to move, and I'm going to ask Peter Scott to second that we adopt the Environment Canterbury annual plan in the form attached to this agenda 2022-23. I understand that there'll be we'll put that. Yes, I'll put that resolution. Do I put it now? No. Do I put it up here? Put it now in there. Yeah, there's a foreshadowed amendment by Councillor Edge. I think we'll hear from you, your amendment now, before we debate it.
Thank you, Chair. It's just an amendment to item 1 there, to read that adopts the Environment Canterbury annual plan 2022-23 in the form attached to this agenda, with the following amendments made. The amendments relate to descriptions on page 8 and page 71 of the annual plan, and it's just clarifying for the public and confirming that so there's no confusion between the consultation process and the zone boundaries that were indicated in the consultation document that were due to change to a flat fare for all of zone 1, 2 and 3, with the exception being the Diamond Harbour ferry. Would you like me to read those or just describe? Right. Basically, the annual plan on page 8 and page 71 had referred to the Darfield and Leaston being excluded from the $2 flat fare rate. There is now the amendment is that they be deleted so that only the ferry service has a different rate, and that would be $2 and $4 fare. So that covers both of those. So it will read that it's number 70, page 71, for example, for existing zones 1, 2 and 3, comprising the $1 targeted fare, flat fare for those aged under 25, tertiary students, total mobility card holders and community service card holders, and a $2 flat fare for everyone else. And for the ferry service, a targeted flat fare will be $2 and a $4 fare for everyone else.
Yes, well, that's going to be moved by Councillor Edge and seconded by Councillor Clearwater. We'll just ask staff to speak to that now. So I'd like, this is staff, it's based on staff advice, provided this. So if you'd like to speak to that, Stuart, that'd be excellent.
Kia ora, thank you, Chair. So this amendment, as Councillor Edge has identified, is to clarify the extent of the flat fare coverage across all of the bus routes in Greater Christchurch, which includes Leeston and Darfield, so that the $2 and $1 arrangement applies to all bus routes in this area, and the $4 and $2 only applies to the ferry service. So that makes it consistent with the consultation document that went out to the community earlier this year, and aligns with the deliberation process that council went through last month.
Thank you, Stuart. Is there any questions? Councillor Hands.
Thank you, Stuart. Just a question, because obviously we're making this amendment because Darfield and Leeston were excluded. Are you able to just provide some advice around the reason that it was before, was excluded, and was it, have heard comments around capacity and the likes? Are you able to comment on that, and also whether or not, because there's a reference here that the increase in rates required to reinsert those two services into this is 2.3 million, but whether we've had any discussions, because obviously I'm aware that in the past, Darfield and Leeston, we had some funding sharing arrangements with Southern District Council.
So to clarify, this change makes no impact on the rating calculations or funding outcomes of this annual plan. So there's no change to that. The reason was originally included in here was to take account of a potential risk of those services being oversubscribed, recognising they are limited services. So in the case of Darfield, for example, one service in the morning and one service in the afternoon. So there is a capacity constraint there. Whereas in the Greater Christchurch bus network, as we've identified to council through the fare review process last year, there were some routes that we identified within the wider Christchurch area that may suffer from oversubscription at certain times of the day. However, if you're on those routes, for example, the western side of the Orbit route or Route 7, another bus is going to come by in 10 or 15 minutes, whereas in the Darfield case, no other bus is going to come by. So that was the rationale behind this area. But in making it consistent across the city, we can address those particular issues if and when they arise.
Councillor Ian McKenzie.
At what level of capacity do they run now, those particular buses? Stuart?
So with the Darfield service, with the 50% fare in place at the moment, on a Wednesday, we are reaching capacity on that service. And the reason for a Wednesday is some parents do a work from home day on Wednesdays, and so their children travel on the bus rather than being driven into town.
Right, any further questions around that? I don't think there is, so thank you very much, staff. So we'll deal with the amendment at the moment. So Grant, would you like to speak to the amendment?
Just quickly thank the staff for addressing that this morning. I think it's very good, and take notice of your issue of capacity issues, but that is potentially a good thing in that it gets more people on buses from further out. So, and as you say, that can be addressed perhaps in the next annual plan. Thank you.
Else, Councillor Clearwater.
I also thank staff for making this adjustment, and for Grant to actually pick, Councillor Edge for picking it up, because I think it's really important, as the staff have indicated, that we be consistent in our planning. And this is an advantage for us, or of having us being able to, check carefully the documents. Clearly, that came about this very decision to make the hybrid option, and so this little part wasn't fully taken into account. So I'm very pleased, though, that we found a way around this matter. So it's all, the flat fares are quite clear, and I'm not sure if Councillor Sunkel's online, but I know he's asked for good price fares for Leeston before, but he's not here.
Was online, so he is online. Okay, are you wanting to speak, Councillor Sunkel?
Yes, thank you. If I could just very briefly, I thank the team for putting this together. While I had some comfort that there was a reduction in fare, it has been a rather tortuous process to get those bus services up and running due to capacity, particularly in the Leaston space. So I echo the concerns about capacity out of Darfield, but it does simplify the system and provides equity across all the zones in the trial period. So I thank staff for it.
Anybody else wishing to speak? All right, I'd just like to thank staff very much for, this is just an example of the very excellent collaboration there's been between councillors and staff as we've gone through this process. It's a bit tedious, the old annual plan and the long-term processes for everybody, but it's been really good, and we've got here today. So particularly on this issue, thank you very much. So I'll put that that amendment that Grant has just moved, and that you should all have it in front of you. That's the adoption of the amendment around these two specific issues around the bus fares and how they'll apply. Is everybody clear about what we're voting on? All right, all those in favour, please say aye. Anybody opposed? There not being anybody opposed, that is carried. Now that becomes a substantive motion now. So this is now an amendment to the substantive motion, which is the one moved by Peter and I. I don't think we have to change the wording anymore in the substantive motion. This is just included in it. So the next motion is with this, oh, well, maybe it needs, you know, so staff will, we need to vote on it though. So, so adopts the Environment Canterbury annual plan in the form attached to the agenda with the amendment as adopted around page 8 as set out in this resolution below. So you'll just add it together. So that's what we're actually discussing, that whole one, and that's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Peter Scott. This is the main chance people have got to speak to the annual plan. I'm going to allow everybody to speak if they wish. So would anybody like to speak? Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair. And seconding this, gives me an opportunity to say things I need to say reasonably early in this discussion. And can I just first start by saying that we had a good process. We had, as I've said to you before, we wore out a lot of biros, Jenny, on doing this, and Stephanie's been fantastic. So I think we've got ourselves in a good space, and you can see by the flexibility of staff around the issue that we had before us that we're working pretty well together. You know, the number of submissions that we had in the vicinity of like 2,500 and 100, over 100 people came to talk to us, and the main issue was public transport and our fare, and the hybrid model that we've come up certainly should make a difference to the numbers of people that we're getting there. And I was characterised by the amount of different people that we had, the youth that came, and the ratepayers that came to us, the bus drivers and the bus companies themselves, making some really good points and adding ourselves into the hybrid model that we've come up with. I guess the big question in my mind about the intense discussion we have around PT is, and a question I think is probably that we can leave open, but what is the future of PT in this building? You know, like we spend a lot of time on it. We've got a massive amount of change coming our way, as we've talked about from central government, and we oversee one of the most productive farming areas in New Zealand that's going to be affected by that. And so what I'm thinking to myself, having been here 6 years and been involved in transport for 6 years, you know, do we need another model? And I don't want that answer. That's a sort of a rhetorical question I'm putting on the floor. And you know, maybe the time is right for that. 89, this got done. We've got a major amount of collaboration now going on across this area that controls that's affected by public transport. So I'll just leave that there. You know, and coming from South Canterbury, I guess I'm a bit privileged because the major impact of this rate in PT is not going to affect us so much. So our rate, and I can stand on the, you know, my test of this is, can I stand and talk to people about the decisions that we make in this council? I'm very comfortable that I can do that. Maybe other councillors aren't, but I'm very comfortable about this. We did another couple of good things. You know, we've agreed on that flood recovery process, which I think we had a massive debate about that too, but I think it was the right decision in the end that we got to. The thing that I was a bit concerned about was the climate change question that we put forward, but that again has been a pretty fertile question to ask the community in terms of people that come to us and talk to us about that. So that's a really big opportunity for us when we get to sit down again, or when the new council gets to sit down again and talk about that. I'm really happy about the Timuku Vehicle Trust getting off the ground. I mean, that's a great initiative for the community, and it's good to see that we still support that stuff. And the reclassification of the Ashburton Hakateri rating district, you know, that's another thing that the community are happy about and that we've been able to understand. I'm not going to say much more than that. I'm happy enough. I think the debate has been robust as it should be. I think we can congratulate ourselves actually for entering into some pretty intense conversations about things. The people that spearheaded the bus issue, the fares issue, Lan and Phil and Grant and Vicky, well done to them. The rest of us went water skiing behind your boat, but we probably weren't rowing as hard as what you were either. So well done to you. So, Madam Chair, that's all I've got to say on this matter. So I do support the motion that we have in front of us.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. The next person will be to speak is Councillor Lan.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I really want to echo Councillor Scott's thoughts about this annual plan, particularly in terms of thanking the community. We had a really good response in terms of submissions, which is always great. It can always be more, but it was really great, and people took a lot of time to make the effort to come talk to us as well, which we really appreciate. Obviously, staff, thank you, and you deserve all the thanks that comes at you today because it's been really epic. I agree with Councillor Scott that in terms of council and where we got to, yeah, maybe we should be congratulated in some ways. And I'm particularly proud about the unanimous decision for the Public Transport Fares Initiative. I hope that the community really responds in terms of, using the public transport network as and seeing it as the viable option that it is to get us around, or get many of us around. I'm also really glad that our critical work with our integrated planning framework, Te Kore Korika, basically remained relatively unscathed after this annual plan, because it is really the central piece of how we're going to turn this region around in terms of our environmental decline. And we were painted a picture of that very starkly this morning. The areas that I'm disappointed, or the area, is I think it's great that we've recognised that in terms of climate initiatives, public transport is a key area that we can invest in, but I feel like we're still not recognising and deciding to invest in what is essentially the infrastructure of life, and that is biodiversity and our natural environment. So I'm really disappointed that we proceeded and continued to cut our Murudako program, 1.3 million in the first year and 1.4 million in the second year. And also that any initiative put forward in terms of covenanting was also not supported by council. And I think that the reason why I'm most disappointed about this area is because these are the areas which are in our power as a regional council, not necessarily to do the work ourselves, but simply to enable our community to do the great stuff that they're already doing, but want to do it at a higher level. So we know, for example, with covenanting, which is like the gold of biodiversity protection, there's so many people who want to do that, and it's just about supporting our community to do that. So those are the areas that I'm really disappointed in, and particularly that we got, I guess, sucked into the public rhetoric about the percentage rate rise, because including these initiatives would literally mean for the majority of households which are under $1 million, the difference between a rates increase of $1 per week versus a rates increase of $1.07 per week, or for properties between $1 million and $12 million, an increase of $6.90 per week versus $7.10 per week. So it's really sort of marginal stuff, but to me it's important because it's about us playing our part in the areas that we are responsible for. It will never be cheaper or more cost effective for us as a society to take this kind of action now. And I feel like we didn't grasp that as a council, and I'm disappointed in that. In saying that, there's positive things. Thank you for being part of this together. And thank you, Chair. I'm happy to support the annual plan today.
Thank you very much, Councillor. The next person we've got to speak is Councillor Claire Mackay.
Thank you, Chair. In a way, it is such a relief to get to this stage of the annual plan. Heard that just a minute ago. And it hasn't been an easy road. And I also particularly want to thank the effort and the persistence of our CE and the staff, particularly over the last 8 to 9 months as this has been developed. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you. And it's, yeah, you'll get to the end of the day. Okay, fine. Look, I'm well aware that the annual plan has to be adopted in order to set coming year's rates, which is an increase in rates revenue to be collected of 16.2%, and I will use percentages, or 20.2 million. And in my view, this is a huge financial impost on our rate base, particularly when considered on top of the 12.6% rise last year and the signalled 10% for the 23-24 year. A one-off rate increase of this size is not even remotely affordable for our ratepayers and communities across Canterbury. But when considered in the light of the first 3 years or the 3 years of the long-term plan that this council has developed, it is certainly not sustainable. I've considered very seriously my responsibilities to both this organisation and to the ratepayers across Canterbury and those that I represent in presenting my views here today. I believe this table did not take the opportunity to prioritise our work programme nor respond to the rapidly changing real world we find ourselves facing. And the outlook is not pretty. We have kicked the can down the road by our failure to critically evaluate and prioritise. And then by deep funding to the tune of 6.2 million, the freshwater regulatory framework, which is a core function. And I agree with Councillor Farm here, very important piece of work. And it's an operational expense. But we've not only done it for this year, we did it last year, and we've done it for the following year to soften the blow for our ratepayers. There is no way to escape the fact that we are adding significantly to the cost of living crisis for our stressed and significantly impacted communities, already dealing with a myriad of escalating costs in households and businesses. And this rate bill will land in their letterbox in the next couple of months. I do acknowledge a sizable chunk of the rates increases with respect to public transport. And I am supportive of the 2-year trial that was developed following the consultation. And do thank staff for coming to us with that initiative. While the key drivers of the fare trial included reducing carbon emissions, congestion, and an increasing patronage, the reduced fares will be welcomed in times of this financial hardship. But like many submitters, I, however, remain of the view that we need to get a PT service that people want to use, is reliable, is frequent, and gets them to where they want to go. I also support the debt funding of the flood recovery work and the reclassification of the Ashburton rating area that we consulted on. Unfortunately, despite agreeing to the above issues that we consulted on and supporting the real staff reductions and deliberations, I cannot today support the adoption of this annual plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mackay. The next speaker will Councillor Phil Clearwater.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to strongly support the adoption of it. I think it would be a terrible shame if, as a council, we didn't adopt this today. And I'll certainly, besides that, sincerely thanking staff for a huge effort, and my fellow councillors, because I think a huge amount of work has been done, and I'm impressed with that, and I'm not alone. I guess, like Councillor Farm, I was disappointed really about the biodiversity part and the funding, the reduction in funding there, and especially like especially around. And I guess my hope is though that the Mahere working group, in fact, we find some ways forward to actually fine tune the decisions that have now been made and we're making. Because my concern, though, I think it's essential that we do that, because as Lan has implied, in fact, in all the work we do, the biodiversity part is all about, as we know, retaining and improving the whole ecology. And without that link, we would fail. So we need to invest in that part too. I also agree with Councillor Farm around needing clarity around the dollar amount, the dollar increases as against the percentages, because it's the dollars actually, which extra rates which the public and myself and each of you are going to pay. That's where it's going to count in terms of the cost in our back pocket, and it ranges, and that's I believe it's a fair system that ranges, and particularly because we have made significant fare reductions for public transport. I'm sure that those are going to be appreciated by the public. I believe they already are. That's a great shame that, in fact, COVID is interfering with our patronage right now, because we made significant fare reductions. And it's absolutely clear, because of the additional services we are going to run, it has not been at the expense of service improvements. And I've been really rapt to note that, in fact, today we are deciding on significant service improvements that around this table we've asked for a long time. And it's really good they come to fruition. And the example of the super coal extension of the free travel, it's $70,000 a year only. And we know, and we were told, that in fact a major problem for older people is their isolation. And so this is a great way of actually contributing to the whole of our environment, including the social part in which people live in. And I guess the extension of the service, the developments of routes 17 from Littleton and 28, and as well as the additional morning service from Cass Bay, they're service improvements which I'm sure will be appreciated. As well as, and I think it was really important, we debated this hard, including funding, because we know that in fact the costs are going to increase. So councillors, overall, I think that this has been a really good planning process. It's been hard, it's been laborious, and people have done huge work, as I've indicated. One of our submitters this morning made a point where he said decisions are best made in the sunlight. And that's what this process is really about. And there's another phrase too, that sunlight, in fact, is the best disinfectant. And it's not that it needs all fixing. It means that, in fact, we find with the disinfectant and sunlight, we're finding healthy ways to actually arrive at the best decisions in terms of of all of the work that Environment Canterbury do and for our constituents.
Thank you, Councillor Clearwater. Councillor Grant Edge.
Thank you, Chair. Just like to say, Council successfully lowered its proposed annual plan rate from 24.1% to now 16.2%. And that's meant, as Councillor Farm suggested, that the majority of homeowners' rates rises for properties under $1 million across Canterbury, and there'll be some slight differences. But you're talking just over $1 a week to deliver an enormous range of environmental, social issues that we have to deal with as a regional council. The long-term plan had indicated that year 2 was going to be 18.8% rise for year 2. And we've achieved a much better value than anticipated. And a lot of hard work and debates gone on to enable us to do that. And we've listened to our community who wanted change with the bus fare system. And we've done that with great support from the community. And as Councillor Clearwater is saying, the elderly gold card users now have free fares extended from 9 o'clock in the morning, meaning that they can stay out later for a meal in the city or go to the movies or just have more active social life. There have been many cost escalations with the public transport system, COVID-19, reduced patronage, but things are turning around. And the government's 50% fare reduction for a few months has shown that lower fares do work and patronage has risen accordingly. And the purpose of the fare review will achieve its goals of patronage uplift and a reduction of carbon emissions to meet our climate change responsibilities. The Greater Christchurch partners in Waimakariri and Selwyn have invested in park and ride schemes, and the direct bus journeys have become very popular for commuters. We've had to borrow for our continuing planning process, and staff have sensibly spread the costs across the long-term plan timeframe. They're a necessary thing that we have to do in terms of our regulatory responsibilities. In terms of flooding, well, that's an unexpected event. $12.2 million. Where are we going to get that money from? So again, we have spread that the costs for payment back and rates over a longer time frame. And in fact, we were told that perhaps the May event itself could have actually cost our communities overall about $100 million. And these events are going to become more costly over time. And going forward, we're going to have to start to have some really difficult conversations about adaptive solutions, perhaps moving away from rivers and ensuring we don't build in known high hazard areas. In the meantime, borrowing is certainly going to help us make real change. Won't be a big impost on our current ratepayers. And we know that our planet's under immense stress and have declared climate and ecological emergencies. We're committed to maintaining progress towards avoiding further environmental harm, and this has to occur at a much faster pace. And if we don't continue to progress, costs to sort the problems will escalate and be unaffordable to all of us. This modest rates rise increase has been arrived at with much thought and concern for everybody in the community, and we've strived for fairness in the face of various crises that are facing people around the world and in New Zealand. The annual plan enables the Regional Council to continue to action the goals and levels of service identified in the long-term plan, albeit deferring some timeframes and adjusting budgets. And like others, I too would have liked to have seen some more funding for Mihi and biodiversity initiatives, and greater funding to support community groups to undertake their own local environmental improvement projects. It's disappointing that councillors didn't support spreading the replenishment of reserves similarly over a longer time frame, which could have again reduced rates a little bit more too. But overall, the annual plan will continue the momentum of change and does not diminish the transformational opportunities and enduring priorities that were set in our strategic direction. And I'm committed to our values and role as stewards of the environment. So I'll be voting in favour of adopting this annual plan.
Thank you, Councillor Edge. The next person to speak will be Councillor Tane Apanui.
So I'll be voting to pass this annual plan, but I'm not excited about it. This annual plan is okay. It's good enough. It's not horrifically expensive. Neither is it aspirational. It's simple, but it's clumsy. Simple. We've shown okay restraint, but we wanted to do too much and our priorities got lost. We can't solve climate change from this building, but we panicked and tried. which then left us short in the areas we could actually do some good in our local biodiversity. I like simple PT fares, but ours are clumsy, mostly due to the antiquated ticketing system that we've got. And we're waiting on something better. And we were told to wait, but we're in a bit of a holding pattern, which is a bit awkward. But there's no equity between a 5 kilometre trip costing $2 and a 50 kilometre trip costing $2. The hub and spoke model doesn't suit our region. We're not in love with our cars, and with nearly 18 million passenger trips pre-quake and 15 million post-quake up until 2014, when we introduced the hub and spoke model, now we languish between 11 and 13 million passenger trips. We didn't touch the fares. We didn't take away bus lanes. There's 40,000 more people in the city than what there was pre-quake. We're pulling the wrong levers. My hope now is that PT Future's second business case, which is straightening the secondary routes, will make the network better. Because that's where we've fallen down. But those levers and mechanisms have been taken out of our hands in this room. So we went searching for other levers to pull. We've pulled levers with gusto. We're at a point in time where if you're going to pull a lever, it should be done with care. Each lever needs to be tweaked, not yanked. But we rolled in and tried to yank every lever we could get our hands on. We can't solve climate change in here, but I'm not saying we shouldn't move in that direction and create things that other people can replicate. We're actually doing pretty well in Canterbury in some respects. I'd like to thank the staff. The staff have basically saved us from ourselves and from time to time. And essentially, with this annual plan, they've made honey out of the dog crap. And I think they're amazing. I'm constantly amazed by the skill sets that sit within this building. I consider myself fortunate to be here. And even the academic horsepower we have sitting around this table, as Ian said, on our first week in here is actually quite amazing. I'm privileged to sit with all of you in here, and from time to time, you've all impressed me. During the course of the annual plan, from time to time, you've all frustrated me. But here we are. So I'll be voting for this annual plan.
Thank you, Councillor Apanui. Councillor Vicky Southworth.
Thank you. So yeah, firstly, I'd like to say thank you to staff and and to everyone on the table. It's a huge piece of work, and here we are, and I'll certainly be voting for it. The bus fare change is a really key piece that we've delivered this time around. It was a big part of our consultation. We had an enormous amount of submissions on this, including, pleasingly, a really big cohort of young people. And I think that's something to really be commended, because we're losing, you're hearing it currently, because the elections are coming up, about how much disengagement there is with local government. But we had a huge number of submissions, and particularly young people. And I think what we've done is delivered something which will show those people that responded to our submissions that we listen and that we take on board what they think. And the staff came up with a fantastic combination looking between option 1 and 2. And I think that was really well done. And on top of that, we're continuing to improve services. We've managed to add in that little Cass Bay bit of bus, which is, as a mother of a teenager, I know just how much that will mean to those people in Cass Bay. So that's fabulous. And I think it's important to remember those small things. They all add up to the whole. We've got improvements for our bus drivers, both in terms of their experience, putting in funding for improving bus driver and passenger safety. We're looking at increasing pay and making sure at least at that livable wage. We've got more EV buses coming. We've got improvements on services still to roll out through our RTP. So we're across that. It's not just about fares. It's absolutely not just about fares. And I think to suggest that it's one or the other is wrong. Where I am disappointed is the losses from the Mahere programme. We've had about daylight, worked in decisions in daylight today, also I personally really like the best time to plant a tree was 30 years ago, the next best time is now. And unfortunately, we've cut back on Merurako, which is both about biodiversity and climate change. It was the nexus of those two huge issues that we have facing us. And so to be pulling back 2.5 million between this year and next year, whilst I recognise that I'm really pleased we are putting additional funding into the Waitaha Action to Impact Testable Fund, and that given that we had over $800,000 worth of applications last time around for a really quite a small pool of money, that goes quite some way towards enabling our community to really put all their energy, effort, volunteer time, the amount of enthusiasm and effort that people across Canterbury want to put into improving their local environment is huge. So everything that we can do to achieve, to assist with that, I think is the right thing for us to do. We don't have to do it ourselves. That enables others. Hence my disappointment also with the Banks Peninsula Conservation Trust proposal that failed, because that is good people with good ecological value land in a waiting list, wanting to put their land into protection, and that is enormously disappointing that we haven't enabled that to happen, and I really hope we can do something about that. Ultimately, I think what's frustrating, and this is for both us to figure out how to communicate better with, and also the media, I think, has to hold responsibility for this as well. The lazy average rate rise in communication means we have perverse outcomes. So by putting a large amount of effort and energy and funding into bus fares Greater Christchurch, we've had to pull back on biodiversity, which is a complete and utter nonsense. To have targeted rates delivering something specific to particular communities, then thrown into an average, and then that affects what we can do elsewhere across our region, it is just a nonsense, and it frustrates me enormously. And so that's something that I would really like to see all those different entities, us, media, us as councillors in our communications, if we can start to explain how this works and move away from average rates rise and actually talk about the issues and what we're putting our money to, that would be great. Because fundamentally, I think we're actually doing really good stuff, and our annual plan's fabulous, our long-term plan was fabulous. We're moving in the right direction, and we have climate change, and we have biodiversity, and we have citizen communication, and we have enviro schools, and we have It's Time Canterbury, and so many good things that we've got underway in this term. And I really hope that we can hang on to that, and fabulous staff, fabulous us. I'm going to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Southworth. Councillor John Sunkel, do you like to go next?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I will leave my camera off. I'm dressed for ill health rather than a committee meeting of council. I'm challenged by, I guess, our lack of prioritisation, and it led us over the last 6 weeks, 8 weeks, to having really tough conversations as we saw the potential of inflation taking over, other matters coming into play that we're going to take us well beyond the 24.1%. So absolute massive thanks to staff who pulled together, found our way through, and got us to the point that we are today. Prioritisation isn't coming to the end of the process and deciding what you want to cut. Prioritisation should be a beginning point where we prioritise the most important things and then move on with them, and then do whatever else we can fit within an envelope or a budget. Two of the things that we've really got right in my mind are public transport. And when Councillor Hands and myself had a little play around free fares, it was about driving a conversation, creating a conversation in the wider community. And we've ended up where we have with our hybrid model of $2 and $1 and the like, a really, really good outcome for a whole bunch of people across the community, and an opportunity for us to drive some mode shift and get people thinking about transport in a different way. So I'm excited that a conversation we started 12, 18 months ago has come to a point where we have got significant good public policy change in place around transport. And the other major point that we had was flood recovery, significant events. We needed to recover the funds for matching the NEMA money those flood events do not just directly affect those people that live by a river or potentially downstream from a river. We are talking about protecting our regional and national assets, our railway lines, our state highways, our telecommunications, our power supply coming across rivers. We're looking at our hospitals and our communities and the likes of Ashburton. So it's really important that we absolutely understand what resilience looks like, and we understand why we need to protect those assets. They're not about the farmers or the householders or the lifestylers beside rivers. They are about protecting a full community. So again, I thank council and staff for coming to the conclusion of supporting our work around the rivers and the recovery that we need. Thank you for that. That's all I will say.
Thank you, Councillor Sunkel. Councillor Elizabeth Mackenzie, would you like to go next?
Yes, thanks. I'll just get my notes. Yeah, first of all, I just want to thank staff for all of the work that they've done on the annual plan. It's sort of been a huge amount, and there's been a lot of sort of last minute up late over weekends, this sort of thing. And so, yeah, it's a lot of work and we do really appreciate it. I just want to deal with an issue that Councillor Apanui raised about expenditure on climate change. I believe if you have a look at the budget, I don't think we've actually spent a great deal on climate change compared to the millions that we've actually spent on public transport. So I would take issue with that. But just generally, like Councillor Farm, I am very disappointed that half of our councillors did not support funding for biodiversity and planting trees, and particularly for Banks Peninsula, because we've had farmers come to us from there asking for help to set aside land for sensitive natural areas, Indigenous biodiversity, and they've asked us, and we're not funding that. So, yeah. I am also worried about the affordability of rates, given all of the other costs that are rising for everyone. But I see our shortfall for funds in quite a different light to Councillor Mackay. While I agree that we need to prioritise better, we also need to consider why we have trouble getting funding. Firstly, we don't have major income generating assets like ports or airports. But really, the main issue is that we, that is local government, have not been properly funded by central government since the reforms of the 1990s. And this is why we have to keep going back to our ratepayers for funds. So I will support the annual plan. Overall, I think it is a good plan and it covers many things that we need to do. But I would ask council that we lobby government to restore proper funding to local government, rather than going to our ratepayers who at the moment can ill afford more rate rises. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. Councillor Ian Mackenzie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have mixed feelings about this annual plan, but I certainly welcome the decisions around funding for the rivers, especially the reclassification of the Ashburton River Rating Scheme, which is a sort of a first step in a review of how we fund, how we rate for and fund, and then manage our rivers across the whole of the Canterbury region. So this is specific to the Ashburton River. So watch this space. I also welcome the introduction of an outer river flood management fund, although it's only modest in its first inception. And I also welcome the funding of our flood recovery funds, flood recovery costs from the general rate, and echo the comments made by Councillor Sunkel that this isn't just about protecting the odd farmer's paddocks, but it is actually about infrastructure. And note that when the Ashburton River Bridge was closed, those people, and something like a quarter of the population of urban Ashburton, were cut off from all medical supplies and hospital care, which is actually quite significant if you can't get across to a local pharmacy to get medical care. And Neil Brown, the Mayor of the Ashburton District, noted this. I also note that the Selwyn River was cut in several places at the height of the flood, and that people in the Selwyn district had the same level of isolation. And that's quite critical when government reforms have centralised a lot of our facilities. And so we need to think about the bigger picture when we talk about floods. And I also think it's fair to say that I disagree with the comments made by Councillor Edge that we can't afford to manage our rivers. I think in Canterbury, I don't think there's any excuse for not being able to manage our rivers, and this council is hopefully going to be focused on that in the future as to how we relook at that picture. So I welcome our funding around those issues. I am concerned about our public transport model. I've expressed this throughout the annual plan and the long-term plan debates, because it seems to me that we are driven by experts around this table rather than a business model, a sustainable and constructive business model for how we should invest in public transport. We are very focused on providing bus facilities, and we're not considering the wider opportunity of real modal change. And I note that Christchurch Press ran a story earlier this week, I think, pointing out that we're at, even with a 50% fare subsidy from the central government, but we're still only running at just over 70% of our pre-COVID patronage numbers. I'm concerned about the amount of investment we're putting into public transport with a lack of business and investment analysis of whether that money is wisely spent or whether it's just driven by political rhetoric from councillors, mainly from Christchurch itself, around what they'd like to see. And again, if I was to compare that to the river management, it would be like me as an amateur in terms of river management, telling our engineering team how to build stop banks, and that seems to be inappropriate. And I guess my concerns about this lack of investment analysis in public transport is brought to a head where we are still only running at 60-70% of pre-COVID levels, and yet we are continuing to pump money into public transport on the expectation that we're operating in business as usual times. And when I look at it, it seems to me that we actually could have done our ratepayers a huge service by delaying the trial for the flat fare trial until at least our patronage in our public transport had reached a higher threshold of pre-COVID numbers. Having said all that, I do actually support the flat fare regime, and I think the timing, if it had been, as I say, imposed post-COVID rather than during COVID, we would have actually seen a better return on our investment in it. But I like the consistency, the concept of a simple and relatively flat fare system, because then patronage, those who do use the public transport system understand the cost and the numbers around that. I'm slightly bemused by the what I think is slightly disingenuous views around some of the councillors who are lamenting the lack of biodiversity expenditure, and especially it seems to be for the Banks Peninsula. And I can't help but think that, in fact, if those councils were slightly more open-minded about how we fund some of these projects, we might have actually got those across the line. And so the councillors who are bemoaning the lack of investment in biodiversity tend to be the ones that are against uniform annual general charges. And they tend to suggest that we should fund things on capital value as opposed to a targeted rate or a uniform annual general charge. And I note that the pest-free Banks Peninsula is funded 2/3 by the general rate, and yet projects in more remote areas of the Canterbury region tend to be funded by targeted rates. I also note that when I try to do it's a fairly inaccurate levy, a study, but if I work out the rates paid per head of population and use it as an Ashburton as an example, it's close to $200 a head. And when I look at the rates paid by the average, by the per head of population for the Christchurch area, it's only $130 a head. And so we can use numbers whatever way we like to distort the effect of rates rises, but the continuing use of capital value to fund all projects, when in fact a lot of those projects would be more fairly funded by uniform annual general charge, seems to be something that should be addressed if we want to fund specific projects in specific areas of the region. So having said that, I will support the annual plan, but I have reservations about some parts of it.
Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. Now, Councillor Nicole, would you like to speak?
Oh, kia ora, Chair. Getting the annual plan together for endorsement by Council was an absolute triumph by our staff. Staff have worked with Council since September to get to today. Thank you to every one of our current and former staff and external consultants who have gotten us to here. Ngā mihi nui. Staff at every step have provided clear, consistent advice. However, this Council has not always been clear and consistent. Members of this Council have relitigated at every turn guidance Council has given to staff because they didn't see the Council position as reflecting personal position. And this, I'll say it again when I said it this last time, this is not democracy. Thank you to all the members of the public who took the time to submit on the annual plan, and thank you again to those who also spoke to their submissions at our hearings. Every submission helped shape where we land. On the annual plan itself, on the fair trial, I, for the third time iterate, I would have preferred this Council prioritise investment and service improvements, which is the guidance Council has given to staff, which we have not remained consistent on. Our data show that the current half fare pricing has improved patronage, but patronage is still lower than pre-COVID, let alone pre-earthquake, as Councillor Apanui said. Cheap fares are not going to get people on the bus if the bus isn't going to or from where they want to travel. Despite this, I'm really happy with where we've landed on the fair trial. Simple, straightforward. I'm happy with where we've landed on flood recovery, noting that this is recovery from an event and that we continue to work on wider catchment solutions for long-term resilience under climate change. I look forward to seeing where staff come back to us regarding the climate change levy for our next annual plan. A number of people today have lamented the last minute budget cuts. These are the same people who, after consultation, were suddenly concerned about the rates rise. And these again are the same people who did not want to take a deep dive into our budget before consultation to make the cuts. If we're not willing to take a critical look at what we're doing in a timely manner, then when we panic, as we did here, the additional non-statutory stuff is going to be cut. And that's what's happened. Is this ideal? Absolutely not. But we're working under a pressure cooker and we have to respond, and that's what we did. This Council has struggled to see the forest for the trees, I think, and that is reflected with where we've landed. I want to finish again by acknowledging our staff and our consultants. As a Council, we have access to a huge expertise. We don't always use this effectively, and that has been a real struggle for me personally, where we choose to ignore practicing experts for the sake of ideals. And that ideals don't always get outcomes, whereas, you know, doing the stuff on the ground does. Yeah, I'm going to be endorsing the annual plan. Got it.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Craig, would you like to speak? No. Taumu Taia Yvette, would you like to speak? Okay, what about Tumu Taia Yang Greenwald? Would you like to say a few words? Go on.
Go on. Yeah, ngā mihi ki ngā kaimahi. Kaha koutou i tūtai i whakarongo i ngā whai kaunihira. Engari ko te mea tuarua i hoki atu ki o tari hei kimi te huarahi tika huarahi pai kei mua i a tātou katoa no re nei anō te mihi kia koe Stephanie me o kaimahi he rawe o koutou mahi. Te mei tuarua mihi atu ki ngā te hapori nei hei haramai hei tonu toha hei mauri o mai i ngā whakaaro mo tēnei mahi he rawe. Just quickly, just acknowledging the public really coming in and you know, submissions, and especially the rakatahi he
toko maha I tēnei tau. I just noticed that the amount of submissions, but also from the Rakatahi, and just really acknowledging them. And hopefully, I mean, and we know it was the public transport was one that brought them in, but hopefully now they're engaged, and then for the councillor standing in an election, that they will vote, because normally the Rakatahi don't vote in our elections, but also to acknowledge the many informed submitters, just the quality of the submissions, having read them, so acknowledge the hapori. And also just regarding the river, the flooding recovery money coming in for the 2 years. I know there was some contention in there, but also I believe that could lead into the climate change putia as well. So if as regional rate, some people think that Tautahi's paying for the for the mahi out in the regions, but eventually we're going to have that regional rate for a climate change levy, I believe anyway. So I feel that's a start. People start thinking about that. Flooding is probably a lot of that's caused by climate change, and it's going to get probably hopefully not, but it probably will get worse and worse. So having that that whakaaro for our ratepayers and our hapori out there, that they will eventually have to maybe look at that climate levy, climate change levy, that this is a start. But once again, just acknowledging Stephanie and her staff, amazing, a lot of effort and a lot of work, late hours. So just once again, koutou katoa, huri no te ruma nei, tēnā tātou katoa.
Thank you. I'll just note that we've gone past the statutory 2 hours, but I'm electing to go ahead just to finish this. And I hope that everybody's all right with that. We've just got to hear from Councillor Megan and then myself, and then we'll vote on this, and then we'll have lunch. So over to you, Councillor Hams.
Thank you, Jenny. I've sat here listening to the speeches today and reflecting on the deliberations that we had, and also the discussions we've had over the past, not only this annual plan process, but the past 3 years in terms of our term. And I sit here with significant frustration that when I think about I don't know how you categorize those of us around the table who often dissent. I've been called a contrarian in the past, but I don't categorize myself as a contrarian, more a moderate. And I reflect that often those of us around the table who do take a more moderate view are prepared to gift and gain with respect to wins and losses in the discussions that we have about what to fund and what not to fund. And I don't often see that from others around this table. And that has been an extreme frustration across all 3 years of this term of council through the annual and long-term planning processes. Because for me, as an elected member to this council, if I go back to why we are here, and as we are elected as democratically elected members, what the purpose of local government is within the Local Government Act around social, economic, cultural and environmental well-beings. It's about all 4 of those things, and we're here to discuss and make the best decisions for our organisation that gives effect to social, economic and cultural well-beings and environmental well-beings, not just the environmental well-beings. And we can have discussions about prioritisation of those things. We can have discussions about prioritising different pieces of policy or different work programs within the annual plan as we go. But I do get frustrated when we raise things early on about rescoping work, whether that be statutory or non-statutory, and it doesn't happen. And then, as Nicole said, we come to the crux of it, and we do end up in a position where some of us have to make calls like voting against funding for biodiversity programs, which we would prefer not to do. But that's all we've got left when we've lost every other line in the budget because nobody else was prepared to shift at all. And it sucks. And I hate it. The other frustration that I have when we think about the annual plan is, in the discussion and the debate we've just had around here at the table, was this fixation, and others have talked about the fixation about the percentage of annual rates rises being frustrating for them in the media, and that, you know, it's only a couple of dollars here and there. And I reflect on how much the budget of this place has increased over the past 3 years, or if you go further, in the past 10, and how much this council has run down our reserves in our term. And it is millions and millions, tens of millions actually, of dollars. We can celebrate getting our rates rise from the 26% rate rise down to 16% rate rise if we like. But the fact of the matter is, we've actually just borrowed some money from our reserves, borrowed money for what we've called natural capital projects, but which are planning documents, literal pieces of paper that we are borrowing money for and spreading out over years. We've also borrowed from year 3. If you read our papers, we have decreased, we did make some cuts this time, and I welcome those, and that's great. We cut about $2.3 million. We also increased the expenditure in year 3 by 4.8. So we didn't cut anything. We just kicked the can down the road because it was too hard to actually sit down, have a tough discussion, prioritise, and for some members of the table realise that actually there are things that they're going to have to give up. We've had Shamabel Jacob come in and speak to us a few times, and you probably find it funny. You know, centre-right or moderate politicians don't often quote Shamabel, but I do believe that he is an excellent commentator and economist, and provides a view. And he provided us with a presentation back in May, I think it was, and I've just flipped back through it, and I get frustrated when people say, "Oh, it's only $6. It's only $6 our contribution in terms of the rates." Well, that's fine, but Shamabel's advice to us was something that I've always held dear, and that instead of focusing on us and just our organisation, put the household in the frame. The households across Canterbury and across New Zealand, and actually across the world at the moment, are under significant pressure. Food costs have gone up by 10%, fuel 25%, our rates around 20%. And if I put the household in the centre of the frame, it may only be a small amount every week, but we've failed to actually provide for our social, economic and cultural and environmental wellbeing if we don't consider all of those costs on the households of our ratepayers when we make our decisions. And so I will not be supporting this annual plan for those reasons. I welcome the public transport work that we did, because I chose to prioritise public transport in my votes. And I'm disappointed that I end this term of council with annual plans, not being able to support any of our annual or long-term plans, and also having been the only councillor elected outside of Christchurch City to never support a double-digit rate rise. Thank you.
Right, thank you all very much. I'll just say, we've had it, everybody's spoken, have they? Just in case I missed somebody, I'd just like to say a few words now, then we'll move on to vote on the substantive resolution. I would like to say that I think we've done a fantastic job. I believe we've got an ethical duty to protect our planet as office holders, and we should be working on that more and more and more. We've always had it, if you look back in common law, but it's conveniently forgotten. We have an ethical duty to make ecologically sustainable decisions in the face of planetary overshoot. And it truly is our job. It doesn't matter if we don't have many levers in the climate change or what you traditionally see as the planetary overshoot space, but it's our duty to do it. And more, we are hearing directly from the community who are indeed alienated from democracy. They are disempowered, and we've done everything this term to try, in our ability to try and re-empower the community. And I think it's worked. people are telling me out in the community that they've read about it in my columns, they've read about it in the publications we're putting out, they've gone from those items, they've gone from the youth report, they've looked at our document that we've circulated, and they've found it easy to understand. And I've heard that from dozens of people. I've never heard it before. And I worked for a long time at the City Council, and I was directly involved with elected members. So I would have heard it there if that had been what was happening. They're engaging. More people wrote to me this time as if we went into deliberations about planetary overshoot and our duty to protect the planet we live on. We've only got one of them. It's critical that we take these actions, and our levers are not very good. But we've done a great job because we've stuck with our vision. We're stuck with the vision that we all worked on, and we're getting there. So I'm really proud of us all. And I believe we need people on both ends of the decision-making spectrum around our table. And I don't think it's accurate to say we haven't done deals or we've gone along. It's certainly not accurate to say we've relitigated decisions. We have not relitigated decisions. We've worked in a workshop way with councillors and staff. By the way, it's staff's duty to do this work, and they've done a great job because they've worked with us collaboratively from the beginning to the end, and we've all got here. And what I've seen is most councillors working really hard in this process, and I think you should all celebrate that. You've done a fantastic job, and there's been a lot of learning during this term. So congratulations. I think you're all fantastic. And I think it's a celebration of transparency under the Local Government Act. We're getting better and better at it. You've only looked at the evidence that people have already cited. We've reduced carbon emissions as much as we can by changing the bus fares. We've looked after the well-being of the elderly by allowing them to have their gold card, to stay out late and stop treating them like school children. It really, not everybody is a rich pensioner. There are a lot of poor pensioners, and most of them are women, and there's getting to be more and more of them. And they tell me that they can't go to things at the WEA, the Workers' Education Association, because they can't stay there too late. They can't afford the bus fare home. We've done the right thing. It's about well-being. We've looked after the well-being of the environment, and I'm really sad about Mihi. And we've got a working group called Mihi, and remember where that came from. A common thing that we could all agree with, all the people in the Conservatives, all the people in the Progressives, or whatever you want to call them, it's actually citizens. You're all representative of what citizens think, and they all want to restore the biodiversity. Of course they do. They tell you all the time they want to do that. That's why they're all out there planting trees. Anyway, I think we've been fantastic, and I think it's a really good decision what we've done about the rates in the rivers. Of course, we've got to help the whole of Canterbury get safe around rivers, but at the same time, we've got to advocate to central government, which we're doing, around helping us out with that money. And I think they are going to during the next budget. I'm hoping they will, because they will see sense, because we're getting more and more of these floods. And I want to celebrate what we've been doing about working with mana whenua and iwi Māori. We have a great democracy in New Zealand, but we have to change it. But we have to enable iwi Māori to vote. And that was my concern right at the start of this term, around getting the wonderful tūmutaia that we have at our table. We got them to vote partially through establishing the committees, but that is rubbish. We should be having them voting, and now hopefully in a very short time we will have that. And that is going to be us a step up in our democracy, a whole constitutional conversation we should be having all across New Zealand. It's not just about local governments, it's about how our House of Parliament works. It's how much we relate at local level to the politicians. And we've made a change in that too. We've got 2 ministers working with us around some urban development planning. It's fantastic. You've all done great, and we've done lots of good work, and staff have been wonderful. There's always going to be issues. It's going to be fraught. It's a short time frame. No one goes into politics and thinks it's not going to be fraught. Of course it is. It's blimmin' hard work, and you've all done a great job, and I just think you're fantastic, and I'm really glad I've been here. And this sounds like this is the end of me, but it's not. I I just think it's fantastic that we've all done this, and I just want to thank everybody in this building and everybody who's had anything to do with us. Because, you know, if I came and asked you personally, do you want to save the planet? I know what your answer is going to be, because we do not want to be the most educated and knowledgeable species ever to go extinct on our planet. And we haven't got much time left, and we've done our little bit. So, yay, I want to put it in to vote now. So I'm going to move the resolution. I'm not going to read it out. All those people in favour, please say aye. All those against, please say no. And would you like your names recorded? Councillor Hands and Councillor Mackay. Well, it's carried. Isn't that exciting? And just before we go and have lunch, I will move this resolution, delegates authority to our lovely CEO and her lovely staff to make allocations to minor effect or to correct any minor errors to adopt the annual plan. I'll move that, seconded by Councillor Scott. All those in favour, please say aye. Anybody against? There being nobody against, that's carried. Wonderful. We're going to have our lunch now at 1:20, and when are we going to come back? At 2 o'clock? Yeah, let's come back at 2 o'clock. We are coming back and we are at 8.4. That's page 80 of the agenda. And this is around the specific rate resolutions, which you have to all do together. We're going to do them in one block because otherwise they all are interrelated and they affect each other. So welcome up to the table, Giles and Brian. Would you like to speak to this report for us? Thank you very much.
Now that the annual plan has been approved by council, this is the resolution to strike the rates. Is that the right? So that we can then rate all of the money. We are more than happy to answer any questions, Brian.
Any words, Brian?
This is really just an administrative thing to authorise us to actually action the annual plan. So it's quite simple.
Either of you want to make a comment about what it's like to strike the rates, since you haven't done this part of the job before?
Well, I'm waiting for you to approve it so that we can strike the rates.
If we've approved it, we can. All right, so we're going to look for a person who's going to move all four of these on page 80. That's appointing under the Local Government Act the rating for the territorial authorities and the resolutions we have to establish, delegating authority to the territorial authorities around the function of keeping and maintaining rating information and the database and the rate records, delegating the pursuant to the LGA once again to the Chief Executive, the Director of Corporate Service and the Finance Officer to do all the work that they need to do around penalties and all of that under 2. And 3, resolves to approve the delegations to the Director, Corporate Services, that's you, Giles, and sign the rating collection and district valuation data agreements. And then 4thly, resolves that according to the Local Government Act and the Canterbury Regional Council's long-term plan, the funding to set out the rates, and it looks to me like you've done a very good job. And we've got these sections here, A, B and C, and we do that all together. So I hope councillors have looked at the rating that concerns them, particularly the rates in the various areas. It's very interesting, and I think at some later date we might have a rates working party and actually so that it becomes very clear to everybody what is happening with our rates, because, you know, we've been doing it for 30 odd years, just like reviewing the RMA. It's timely to review our rates, how we set them, what areas they recover, like with my targeted rates for pest management in my area, so that citizens can understand what they are with the language changes on the rating bills, so we can work on that. Who would like to move it? Moved by Councillor Peter Scott, seconded by Councillor Apanui. I'll leave it over to you. Would you like to speak, Councillor Scott?
Oh, yeah, just to say that this is the mechanism, I guess, the instrument in terms of how we get the rates, and thank you for the information that's there. And it allows you, if you know property value, to sort of work out what the rate's going to be. So that's quite helpful. But wiki, I'd like to have it on an app or something would be really nice, but you know, it is there, it's in front of us, and we can see it, and we can see the variation across, especially interesting stuff across the, you know, the rating areas. And then like my river here has probably got 10 or 12 different rating areas to get the money it's required. At 700,000 that's required to do the work we need to do in that. So I'm pretty happy to move that.
Would you like to speak? Councillor Apanui?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank staff for the work that's gone into that and for the work they've put into themselves by going to the university to understand all this and to get it all prepared for us. Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak to this rating document? All right, well, if everybody's clear about what's happening with their rates, and I'd just like to say a few words in terms of working with the communication staff. We're going to great lengths to set up and improve our rating part of our website. So I encourage the public to look out for that and look at the excellent plain English explanations that we're working on for that. And I'm personally going to put my rates bill up there, and we're going to have a plain English interpretation of it, which is something exciting to look forward, especially for me. But all the other, how many thousand are there in the northeast electorate of Innes, Papanui, oh God, I can't think what were coastal and the Burwood area, part of Burwood, the coastal and all those residents are all contributing to a pest management. It's not. Yes, they are actually. No, it's not. You're part of Burwood, then, is it? It's in the East Ward. You're not in the East Ward. You're not in my ward. Well, then the email's wrong then this morning. So that's why we need a rates working party so we can work out what's actually going on. So anyway, it's very interesting, and thank you all very much for all the work you've done, and we will go ahead and have a working group on it so that we can renew it, reinvigorate it, and make it really visible to citizens, including me as the chair, about what the ratings bill is about, and we will have that very clear explanation on the website, and that'll be fantastic. So it's a work in progress. So I'd like to put that to the council. All those in favour, please say aye. Anybody against? There's nobody against. That's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Giles and Brian, for doing a great job, which is your job. Page 110, 8.5, Councillors' Reimbursement Policy. Would you like to come to the table, Catherine, and talk to this? That'd be great.
Thank you for the opportunity to explain this. At your meeting on the 8th of July this year, 2021 actually, you approved the councillors' expenses, allowances and reimbursements policy at that time. Since that time, we received the updated determinations for 2021, so for the year we're currently in now, that goes up until the 30th of June, so in 2 weeks' time. And there were a few changes within that, which is what this draft policy is doing. The main changes in relation to your allowances and expenses were in relation to mileage allowances, communication allowances, and we've also added some administrative updates where we've changed position names in the last few months just to make that clearer. The intention is that since we have just recently received the determinations for the 2022-23 year, that in the next month or so that we will have that conversation that we need to have around what you'd like for some of those areas and the options that we now have available to us to have that conversation. So this paper is specifically about the allowances that we need to arrange for the year to the end of 30 June 2022 that we're currently in.
Thank you, Catherine. Have we got any questions for Catherine about this? Elizabeth, would you like a question?
Yeah, I just wondered if staff could explain where we are going with this reimbursement policy in the future, in terms of how are we able to change it in the future so that it leads to a reduction in carbon emissions for our organisation. Because, for example, at the moment, there's no sort of incentives to take bus or coach travel for regional councillors, that is for out of Christchurch. And I believe that the most recent updates from the Remuneration Authority allows for that consideration to be made. So I just wonder if staff could explain where we can go with this.
Thank you. Over to staff.
Thank you for that question. The latest determination allows more flexibility in how we look at some of those matters, which is why we want to have a conversation with you, and maybe you may choose to do a working party of councillors to look at that. So we are going to look at that as what we do when we bring the update for the new determinations.
Well, thank you for that question, Councillor Mackenzie. Have you got any more questions? Well, that's excellent news, because that fits in with our carbon reduction plan that we've had the consultants do. Is that what it was called, Giles? We just had it at council, and we talked about staff travel, but our councillors can do our little bit to reduce it too. So that's excellent. Thanks very much for that. Any other questions? All right, well, I'll ask for somebody to move this. Who would like to move this? Councillor Phil Clearwater is going to move it, seconded by Councillor Vicky Southworth. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Clearwater?
No, I think we've considered most of it before, and we were pretty unanimous, I think, in agreeing with the changes that have been made.
Right, Councillor Vicky, would you like to speak?
Just say I've been good to know that we'll pick this up and look at the carbon footprint reduction opportunity, because it actually affects, I think, city councillors as well across the board. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to say a few words. I think the Remuneration Authority should listen to this recording, and they should know that they should improve the allowances and reimbursement given to councillors across our nation. It's not good enough, and people aren't paid enough, and they don't get the right reimbursement and allowances that they should be getting to reward them for the excellent community service they're doing in interrupting their careers or their retirement or their farming business or whatever else they do, and come and sit round council and make decisions. People should be paid a decent wage, and it should be recognised as very important public work. So I'd also like to urge the Remuneration Authority to follow the government's lead in the carbon emissions policies and immediately change the reimbursement and any other policy they've got to fit in with the government's overall plans to have our nation reduce carbon emissions. Okay, anybody else wanting to speak? All right, I'm putting the motion now. All those in favour, please say aye. Oh, did you want to speak, Evie? No, okay. Everybody, anyone against? There's been nobody against. That's carried. Thank you very much for all your work on that, Catherine McMillan and Catherine Jackie. Good. All right, we're on with the next thing now. I took all that resolution as being one, by the way, in case somebody was wondering. Oh, page 136 is the council election report. I'd like to invite Catherine McMillan back to the table. Sorry, Catherine, but we are supposed to do it all ceremoniously like this because, you know, we are a mini parliament. People forget that. Just because we don't have a cabinet handbook, which we should, by the way, we haven't got a cabinet handbook and we need one desperately. I hope someone's listening to that as well. You should leave the table and come back, and you shouldn't be there unless I've called you. So we can just note that for officers. All right, council election report. Thank you very much. If you'd like to speak to it, that'd be great.
Thank you. I'm actually presenting this in my role as Deputy Electoral Officer rather than my role as GM Governance. As you're aware, we've got a local body election coming up on the 8th of October, and this paper is bringing some matters to your attention that are essentially designed to ensure that the operation of the council can continue through that period and up until elected members have the right to govern all the way through to the election. And during that period, communities also have the same legitimate right to receive information and to have access to information that they need of their communities. But we need to balance that against the requirement that local authorities don't promote any particular candidate or either sitting member or proposed candidate in that. So there's a bit of tension sitting there, which is what this paper is intended to do. So it has The first resolution is about receiving the protocols for council members and staff, and that's a guideline to enable us to help you people to stay safe, for those of you who choose to stand again, and also for our staff, either as interacting with members or they choose to stand themselves. And we're proposing to adopt a pre-election period in respect to pre-election communications, which will enable the interaction with the community to continue, but in a manner that does not breach any requirements around the use of resources. And so the policy that we are proposing here to adopt is that mass communications will continue through the pre-election period, but will observe the following guidelines: that no councillor photographs or contact details will be included in any publications or on the council's website that could be viewed as for campaign purposes, that the chair and committee chairs only will be quoted in response to external public and news media comments made by council business, and the chief executive or her delegate will be used for all other mass communications. Happy to take any questions.
Questions anybody's got? Anyone want to ask a question? I have to say that this is normal practice. And do you want to say what it's based on, Catherine? Did you say that?
Your button, Catherine.
I'll pop your button on, Catherine.
I'm normally quite good at remembering the button. There are guidelines that previously the Officer Auditor General had put out, but they have no longer updated them, but they still sit there as principles. Local Government New Zealand and Taituara also put out guidelines around these protocols that have been widely adopted and have found to be effective through previous election campaigns and through the wider New Zealand environment.
So I'd just like to say, if any councillor during the election period has any problems with any of this, or you want to know whether you can do something, just ask me or the Catherine or Stephanie, I guess, but just to ask rather than, you know, if you're concerned, it's better to ask than tell it and we find out after, and that causes a hassle. So that'd be good. Any more questions people have got about this? Lan.
Kia ora, Catherine, thanks for this. I just note the use of council resources for election purposes being unacceptable, and I just want to specifically ask about the internet, because for example, if you're on Facebook campaigning, for example, and we still have our council devices, would you encourage, for example, that we literally swap devices?
Yes, I would.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
So I would suggest that you don't use any of your ECan equipment for any aspect. So use a completely different computer. Don't do it when you're on our Wi-Fi network. Make sure that you use a separate email. No printing, no resources of any sort around that. Yeah, so it's in your best interest to keep it completely separate.
Councillor Southworth.
Oh, that's weird. Anyway, if there's so currently, if there is something that comes up on a Environment Canterbury Facebook thread, that's something that I feel is good to be shared widely with constituents and the like. It's say the bringing people to the people's panel part of our webpage, for example, that's just gone up. So I've shared that on. Is that something that we can't? I mean, I feel like as part of my councillor role is to do that. That's part of the work we do. Is that something we should not be doing once we're into this time, or is that still acceptable?
I would suggest you keep that very separate. So we as ECan will not be following or sharing anything that councillors put up. But the other way around, if you on your completely personal Facebook page choose to share something that is publicly available, then you're probably okay. But I'd say you're getting into what I term the grey space. So there's definitely a red space and there's definitely a green space, and I think you're getting into a grey space. And I would just be very careful if I was you as to what you do about that.
You do have a bit of discretion there yourself. your test is that what you'd normally be doing, and have you got evidence that you've normally been doing that throughout the term? That's, anyway, look the rules up yourself and have a think about it. Thank you very much, Catherine. That's excellent. Did anybody want to ask another question? All right, thank you very much. Who's going to move this? Oh, what do we got? Oh, is there Elizabeth? Thank you. Thank you very much. Elizabeth, you've got a question? Come back, Catherine.
Yeah. Skip my question. Yeah, so what do we do if the media contacts us for a comment? Do we say, look, I can't make a comment as a councillor because I'm now a candidate and I'm not a councillor? I mean, how do we deal with that?
You are still a councillor up until the election time when you're then no longer a councillor. The green space would say you can repeat council policy or what has been a clear decision. You start to get into a difficult situation if you then start to say, and I'll continue to support it and do it, and you're still doing it in your councillor role. So I would suggest you're really clear if you get a media query, that is you're speaking as a candidate, not as a sitting councillor, and this is your view. And at that point in time, just make sure you're not doing it wearing any ECan clothing or having communicated with them via your ECan email or anything like that. So it really is up to you to make that distinction between what is your personal campaigning and what is your role as a councillor.
Great, thank you.
Try to get a bit more informed about this. Thank you, Elizabeth. You can actually go online and there's some interesting cases, even from the last election. I think you try Taranaki. Try the Google. Just try Googling Taranaki Regional Council from the last election period. Anyway, just a suggestion. There's lots online that where you might be able to read, and that might help you understand what you can do and you can't do. All right. Any other questions? Oh, Councillor Mackenzie.
I was just wondering where I get my ECan clothing from.
We didn't give you any, all the rest of us have got it and we keep it secret. Especially me, I've got lots of it. I have noticed a couple of staff walking around in pretty cool looking jackets actually with ECan written on them. I did think I might see if I could get myself one of those.
You might have to work in the field in the cold.
Yeah, we don't work in the field in the cold. Okay, that's cool. Moved by Councillor Mackenzie, seconded by who's going to second it?
Sorry.
This one. No, moved by Peter Scott. This is what happens as the meeting goes on. You see, seconded by Councillor Vicky Southwood. All those in favour. That's because I'm looking that way. Well, was somebody else seconding it? Oh. As long as I don't say the wrong person, like I did a minute ago. All those in favour, please say aye. Anybody opposed? No. Excellent work, Catherine. Thank you very much. Okay, we're carrying on, everybody. We're up to, you're done, are you? Page 150. Did you want to speak? Page 153. Sorry if you did. Page 153. No, just keep your betting to yourself, please, the people on the left-hand side of me. Climate Change Emergency Report. I think this time we're going to ask Staff Member Tim Davey to come to the table, please, and speak to this report, which is supported by the councillors who chair the Climate Change Committee. Thank you, Tim.
Kia ora, Chair. So this is the regular update on the climate change following the climate change declaration of the climate change emergency. This month, we're reporting in on the work that's being done in the Climate Change Working Group. And I do acknowledge that there are lots of these different groups. So this is the group of staff that directly comes through from the Mayoral Forum. So it's staff from across territorial authorities and Environment Canterbury. And you will be aware that under the long-term plan, there is the Canterbury Climate Action Plan, Canterbury Climate Change Action Plan starting next financial year, so next month. And it was deliberate in the long-term plan to hold that back a little bit because of national legislation and national direction that has been coming through. So there's been the emissions reduction plan in May of this year. The national adaptation plan was due and is now due in August of this year. And of course, there's the climate emergency response funding through the budget. And then there's some upcoming legislation as well. So we did hold back on the action planning to wait for some of this national legislation. But in preparation for next year's work, the working group, which as I said is staff from across all councils supported by Environment Canterbury staff, have carried out a stock take of council activity and commitment to climate change action across Canterbury. And that has been through, sorry, I've just lost my place. That's looking at political commitment, local evidence base held by councils for mitigation and adaptation issues, and understanding of the development and implementation of any climate change policies, strategies or plans. So that's a piece of work that has been carried out already. It's being discussed at the working group actually tomorrow, and it is to inform the scope of the action plan that we will be starting work on. So just to remind, that's an action plan for across the whole region. It's not just an Environment Canterbury document, it is included, and we're just trying to work out how we mesh in between the different councils. So we're looking forward to working on that with our TA partners next year.
Thank you, Tim. That was excellent. Anybody got any questions? Councillor Clearwater and then Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Tim, and I'm aware that this is in its sort of formative stages in many ways, this work. So my question though really is to ensure, how can we ensure that the work that CDM, the Canterbury Civil Defence Emergency Management Committee, how their plans are aligned with the work that's done here?
Through you, Chair, and thank you for the question. The link, well, I guess that this is about long-term action planning, and the CDM is obviously response, but they're very closely linked. And the way that happens is at a staff level. I talked about the climate change action working group. There's also a natural hazards management working group that sits under the Mayoral Forum. And as it happens, it works quite well because I chair the climate change working group. James Thompson chairs the natural hazards management. We're both in the same building or very close at times at least, and we talk together quite regularly. And we're just trying to work how we coordinate between the two that both feed into the Civil Defence Emergency Management Committee work. But I guess that the way I see it is that the climate change working group is sort of the longer term action planning, and the civil defence is that response that comes out of it. But it certainly informs a lot of the work that is done by the working group.
Did anybody else have a question around this report? Councillor Scott.
I have a question of you, Madam Chair. Look, we were at the Mayoral Forum and had that excellent presentation from those climate change people who work within this building, but were reporting back to the Mayoral Forum. And I think it would be really great if we could get them in front of us because they're very, very good at what they're doing.
Very excellent suggestion. I have reported that back fully to the CEO. I've also contacted those staff since I've got back in here with that suggestion. I've also talked to other staff in comms about following up, because one of the things that was suggested in that was that we'd really like the local councils in the local areas to be sending in local stories, wasn't it, Peter? And that wasn't happening. I also fed back that we need to have the council staff, you know, the Mayoral Forum bought into the communication plan, and we need to get that in sync with everybody so it's doing something useful for everybody, whether they're in Waimate or Kaikoura. So we have to be sure about that. So as far as I know, staff are doing that. So it's really excellent to raise it here, because we need to thank staff for that really good presentation and get them in front of us, because it's really informative. The other thing I've done is asked a couple of mayors to work with me and who have done solar panels on their farms. And I have about 19 solar panels on my farm, which is only 10 acres in the city, and I've got it smothered in rabbits, by the way. But I have all my irrigation generated in my small area by solar panels when the sun's out, and so does a couple of the other mayors. So there's some ideal stories for our It's Time Canterbury. So we're going to do that. So good. So anybody else got anything at their place we can feature, just let us know. Or if you know anybody in your district who's got anything, a really good story, that's the way to keep people interested, isn't it, Tim? Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Rightio. Elizabeth and Vicky, are you going to move and second this resolution here?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that it's moved by Councillor Vicky Southworth and seconded by Councillor Elizabeth Mackenzie. All those in favour, please say aye. Anybody opposed? Nobody opposed. And thank you very much to staff for helping us out with that. I think it's keeping climate change up in front of us all the time. We're doing a good job. Rightio, we can take a breath now. We're getting towards the end. We're up to number 9, item 9 on page 158 of 159. This is a resolution to go into public excluded. I'm going to move it. It was seconded by Councillor Megan Hands. All those in favour of going into public excluded, please say aye. Anybody opposed? There's no one opposed. We're in public excluded. At 11 a.m. Craig, we'd like to invite you, please, to finish us off. Thank you very much.
Oh, kia ora tātou. Since I get the last chance to speak, I wanted to say a few words. Hey, I really support what Jenny said earlier on about our work this term and also on this annual plan. I think everyone's done a great job, and including staff, of course, helping us through. Yeah, and you know, it's a process where we all probably don't always get what we want, and doesn't always work exactly how we may want it to. But I think you know, where we've landed is a pretty good place to be. We've made definite changes to our this council and to the way the future will be, and that's probably what I'm most looking forward to. Is there's a lot of work to be done still, especially around our planning work that we need to do going forward. So yeah, just wanted to give big encouragement really to the work that we've done, and also that we've got ahead of us, whether you come back or not. But there's definitely more to do. So just wanted to acknowledge everybody for that. And thank you for the support lately. It's been a tough time, but it's good to be back in person today. Like Tane said to me before, it's like coming back. I came back into a premier hockey match rather than just maybe a reserves match. So, but a good day to be back, and especially with seeing the community having a deputation as well as the sort of protest there. So yeah, it was great to be back. All right, so we close off our meeting now. Thanks for everyone's work. All right, he Karakia, Whakamutunga, unuhia, ki turu tapu nui a tāne, kia wātea, kia māma, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua i te ara takata, ko ia rā e rongo, whakairia ki runga ki a tīna, haumie huie tāna ki.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, everybody. Excellent work.